On behalf of the Center for Global Development and Bruegel, welcome to this important discussion on the external dimension of the EU's Green Deal. So we have a lot to cover today, including how the EU is aligning its development efforts with the external dimension of the Green Deal, and in particular with its new Neighbourhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, as well as differing priorities and financial support for a green transition and climate resilient pathway in partner countries. So my name is Michaela Gavas. I am the co-director of CGD's Europe program, and together with my colleague from Bruegel, Simone Tagliapietra, we will be hosting the conversation today. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our speakers. We have Carla Montesi from the European Commission, Professor Junguna Dungu from the African Economic Research Consortium, and Roberta Lusardi from Enel. Unfortunately, the Portuguese State Secretary, Francisco André, has been called to a last-minute scheduled council meeting of development ministers, and he will not be able to join us. But nevertheless, I have no doubt that with such a distinguished panel, we will have a very stimulating discussion. So if you have questions for our panelists, please submit them to events@cgdev.org, or you can tweet at CGDev, #CGDTalks, or you can share your comments and questions via YouTube. So with that, I'd like to hand over to my co-host, Simone.
Thank you, Michaela, and welcome to you all to this interesting discussion today about a critical dimension of the European Green Deal. The Center for Global Development and Bruegel wanted to have this discussion because so far the reflections on the European Green Deal predominantly focus on the domestic dimension of this flagship initiative. However, being the European Green Deal a revolutionary project for Europe that promises to put Europe on track to reach climate neutrality by 2050, radically changing the European energy system, but also many sectors of the European economy, it is important to also look at the external dimension of this initiative. The European Green Deal is inevitably geopolitics, is inevitably foreign policy, and as we will see, is also development policy. There are many reasons for this to be the case. Think about the amount of oil and gas that Europe imports every year from a number of countries around the world. With the European Green Deal, these imports will disappear. There will be a major impact on producing economies also sitting, for example, in Africa. Think about the need of Europe to import raw materials for clean energy technology. This is another major issue characterizing the geopolitics of the European Green Deal. Think about the issue, which is very high on the agenda nowadays, of carbon border adjustment and all the need, for example, to provide exemptions for least developed countries into such a scheme that the EU wants to put in place. But then think about development policy. Europe represents less than 10% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So if Europe truly wants to impact the situation of climate change and provide a substantial contribution to mitigation of climate change globally, it needs to push the European Green Deal beyond Europe's border. And development policy is a fundamental tool, is a critical tool to do so. Europe, and for Europe I really mean member states plus the EU institutions and the European Investment Bank, of course, represent the first donor in terms of official development assistance worldwide. And this is an incredible tool that the European Union can utilize to promote sustainability globally. So with the event today, we really want to investigate and to have a better understanding of what the EU, and notably, as Michaela said, the Commission with its new instruments in DKI, what we can do as Europeans to promote sustainability in developing countries. And let me recall that this is a fundamental element also in the framework of the Paris Agreement. As you know, one of the key principles of the Paris Agreement is the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Under the Paris Agreement, the European Union and other developed nations committed to a certain level of climate finance, so climate finance support to developing countries in order to foster clean energy and sustainability projects. And therefore, this is really something that becomes important also from an international climate diplomacy really perspective. So to do this, let me immediately turn to our first speaker, Carla Montesi. Carla Montesi is a director at DG INPA, following the Green Deal and the digital agenda. So Carla, let me ask you what the Commission intends to do to promote sustainability and the European Green Deal globally over the next years. The floor is yours, Carla. Carla, you are muted.
Yeah. So sorry. Okay, many thanks this morning. In fact, you mentioned already many topics, key elements. But first of all, many thanks for inviting me to speak and to discuss this one key priorities for Europe. Maybe I will start my presentation along three main themes: politics, policy, and instrument that you mentioned. First, about politics. You mentioned already, climate change and the global environment crisis are a key defining challenging of our time. You mentioned Europe has put this as a top priority. We have launched the Green Deal. And just to remind, Green Deal is not just making a leading contribution to the fight against global warming. European Green Deal is also the Europe growth strategy. It's the roadmap for the green inclusive recovery in this post-COVID situation. Allow me to say that just last week, as you know, we achieved an agreement with the European climate law. This law now really will ensure our commitment to reaching climate neutrality by 2015 and reducing our net greenhouse gas emission by at least 50% by 2030. So it's a clearly strong commitment. As you mentioned, it's a stronger commitment for Europe, but with this stronger commitment, we want also to engage ourselves as an example, as a global champion for the sustainability, giving to us ambitious commitment. But as Simone, you mentioned, Europe counts for less than 10% of the world greenhouse gas emission. So it's clear that just doing ourselves in Europe, we will not have an impact. We cannot tackle climate and the environment crisis alone. This is clearly from us. And this is the reason why through our cooperation, our dialogue, our diplomacy, climate diplomacy that we have called outside Europe, we want to make a real difference. And to do this, of course, we want to use all the different policies in our international partnership. Now, if we look to the policies, and as you mentioned, just to see which way we will use our international partnership to work with our partner. When we look to the policies, it's clear that one important policy focus at the heart of the Green Deal is sustainable energy system development and the climate resilience. What we want to do is we want a future where electricity from renewable energy provide opportunity for inclusive and sustainable growth and job creation. So we want clearly to promote a global green energy transition that will focus on increasing the share of renewable energy, improving energy efficiency, contributing, talking about Africa, that it's your focus, to the key strategic problem that we have, that is achieving access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy services. So what we want really to do is to launch with the new financial instrument a comprehensive Africa-European Union Green Energy Initiative to support the African green energy transition. And we hope to be able to launch this new initiative and to announce this new initiative at the next European Union, African Union Summit that was postponed and now is scheduled for early 2022. This is about our focus on energy, focusing on renewable energy. If energy is important, of course, we need to clearly mention agriculture and forestry that are also key for a low carbon and a climate resilience pathway. Once again, it's important for us is to foster a green but also an inclusive, resilient development, leaving no one behind. So in this new package of the Green Deal, as you have seen, there is also the Farm to Fork initiative. So for us, fostering sustainable agri-food system will contribute to reduce the environmental footprint, and at the same time also will improve nutrition, farmers' revenue, and etc. We will work on the same domain, looking to the forest, putting forward forest partnership with countries that are willing to engage on sustainable forest management. We are convinced that Africa and Europe together can lead a smart green transformation. And to do this, of course, we want to do together with our African partners. As you know, just at last October, we have launched a new proposal strategy for Africa. In this strategy, we propose to launch with the next portfolio a comprehensive multi-sector, multi-level, multi-stakeholder investment package for Africa that will cover the digital, the technology economy, renewable energy, transport, health, agri-food system, all the key sector to ensure this green transition. Now, Simone, you mentioned also the instrument that we will use in our external cooperation. Allow me to say that, as you know, we are at the beginning of the new programming exercise. In this new programming exercise, we have clearly put in place one new instrument that we have called this Team Europe, a Team Europe method, because working together with European Union institution, member states, implementing agency, financial institution, we think that working together we can achieve a real impact. By combining the resource, working method, expertise, and tools, we can implement transformative action, and we clearly can have a more impact. We are working on Team Europe initiative on Green Deal priority areas, and we have just received more than 18 proposals coming from our delegation. Now, about money, you mentioned, as you mentioned, we have a new financial instrument you call NDCI. Our legislator now have called Global Europe. That will be our financial instrument for the next 7 years. I'm very happy to say that in this new financial instrument, we have raised our climate ambition, because now we have an overall climate finance target that set that at least 30% of the overall resources available will be dedicated to climate finance. This is a huge ambition, and we are very, very happy to be able to use also this amount to support our partners in achieving this ambition. But allow me to say that, of course, if the European cooperation funds are are important, of course, will be not sufficient to respond to the investment need. So really the intention is to use this amount, to use our official development assistance as a catalytic to leverage other policies, to leverage private funds. And for this, as you know, we have launched the European Fund Sustainable Development in the last 2 years. Now, in the new instrument, we will have a new European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus, with very, very important funds that will focus on crowding in private sector investments. So the idea is clearly to use blended finance, to use a guarantee instrument to lower risk of investing in the key sector of the green agenda, and on this facilitating, we hope, the intervention of the private sector. Maybe just not to have it to be so long, allow me to say that a final element that I would like to consider, that European institutions plus member states are today the largest provider on climate finance worldwide. We have developed a comprehensive framework, a comprehensive tools to direct investment towards sustainable projects and activities, such the European Union taxonomy, for example. Clearly, the intention is to focus the use of all our funds to be absolutely in respect of the Paris Agreement. Of course, working on green investment also means that we will have to cease our support to investment on non-sustainable activities, such as, for example, the fossil fuel. So allow me to conclude reiterating once again that the European Union is clearly committed in helping the African countries to a transition to a low carbon and the climate resilience pathway. Of course, we want not to do alone, we want to do with our partner countries, and we will try to do using all the various means that we have, from innovative financial tools through capacity building, promoting policy reform that will be essential, on technical assistance, really trying to boost investment pipeline that will support this transition. I would say that anchoring ourselves in our international partnership, the idea is clearly to spearhead a sustainable growth model for a fairer, a greener, a more sustainable world. And maybe I stop here and ready for other questions. Over to you.
Thank you.
Many thanks. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, many thanks, Carla, for that excellent opening intervention. If I may, I have a follow-up question. So you mentioned the EU's recently announced taxonomy on sustainable finance. But can I ask you, do you think these standards are realistic everywhere? Or should there be a different approach, for example, in African countries? And taking a specific example, is there a place for natural gas investment in EU development policy?
Thank you. Thank you very much. In fact, I mentioned this work on EU taxonomy, that it's really very, very important. Allow me to say that, of course, we don't want to do this just on Europe. We are also, I say, supporting the coordination of all the international efforts to harmonize methodology, to harmonize the definition of green investments. And to do this, we have launched the International Platform on Sustainable Finance. So we are working not just alone, but we are working with our partners also in achieving all these subjects. Of course, this will imply choice. And I was just mentioning that one of the choices that will imply is to cease to support investment of what we consider non-sustainable activities. We are not saying that this will not be possible. We are just saying that in implementing, in using the European funds, we will have to respect this taxonomy principle. So we will use, as I was just mentioned, we will use to support investment on fossil fuel, for example. But at the same time, trying to promoting a just and inclusive transition, reducing poverty, reducing inequalities, and leaving no one behind. But really, the focus on our policy, looking to the gas, will not be on gas, will be focused on supporting everything that will be on renewable energy, on energy efficiency. So clearly will be a phasing out of the export finance for coal-fired power plants or for just gas. This will be a choice, of course, as we were mentioning. This is also transition. So we will support our partners in leading this transition, but we will use our own fund really supporting the activities that we will consider green. So our focus will be more on renewable energy and energy efficiency, but clearly we will use, for example, our technical assistance in supporting the partner countries in leading this transition phase, where we will have to lead also with the gas question. Over to you.
Great, thank you very much. That was very clear. So our next speaker is Professor Njuguna Ndungu. He is the Executive Director of the African Economic Research Consortium. Professor, if I may ask, so the Portuguese Secretary of State, Mr. Andre, has said that the priorities for Africa should be off-grid and renewable energy, digitalization, access to finance and health. But then by contrast, President Adesina of the African Development Bank said in November that the key to Africa's recovery from COVID-19, the keys were infrastructure, closing the energy gap, mobilizing capital, and job creation. And yet the external dimension of the EU's Green Deal really does focus on climate mitigation more than climate adaptation. So is it not true that African countries prioritize climate adaptation and socioeconomic issues, such as job creation?
Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be invited here, and especially coming from the African Economic Research Consortium. And I'm going to tackle that question through the presentation that I'm going to make. But maybe I'm going to add more to the sparks of the work, to a bit of some sparks in terms of what I do believe we should focus on. The beauty of it, the beauty of the work right now that we're doing, and especially for us coming on from the African Economic Research Consortium, is that, I think I've done the wrong thing. Coming from the, this is the one I want to share. Coming from the African Economic Research Consortium, would like to make sure that we promote what I would call policy clarity in our midst. Let's see. Let me see here. Okay, is it feasible now? Let me just make sure. Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. I think from where I'm coming from, we do believe in policy clarity. And for us, and let me put this slide, because this slide is to ensure that I don't lose my job. I want to make sure that you also understand. We at the African Economic Research Consortium, we deal with capacity building, and we would like to improve the knowledge base. And that knowledge base is very, very important for us to actually sustain, should I say, periods of policy clarity in African economies, as well as capability and leadership in institutions. And that for us is very, very important from where we come from. And I do believe from the point that you mentioned about the confusion between what African Development Bank is talking about and what Europe is talking about. The dimension for it is what ails in African economies. One of them is sustainability issues and poverty. And somewhat we're going to learn into this and say, exactly how do we reverse this instead of an environmental adaptation to clear paths of development? It means we really have to overemphasize some few things. But let me come back to my presentation the way I had focused on it. And one of them is that, and I just wanted to start about how do we reconcile what you have just asked me? And we really need to, for us, climate adaptation, socioeconomic issues, and even job creation, these are critical areas of concern. Why are they critical? By the way, we are talking about where we are in terms of the COVID. We are focusing on lives and livelihoods. That's the starting point. And you can imagine that if you cannot save lives, then you cannot even improve on livelihoods. And so it must be, for me, the most important starting point is to protect private investments, where it means coming in to save lives, and even livelihoods will come later because of human capital. But the first thing is actually health, infrastructure, and human capital development. And then we now move out to focus on all issues of should I say, sustainability. But let me first of all come back to what has already been presented. The European Green Deal that was introduced in 2019, and we are very happy about it, especially in ARC. And of course, we have had even projects that are talking about climate change and economic growth. And we are moving further into biodiversity. But the bottom line is we will see how this works out and how we become partner, or the partnership is created. For me, I do believe, and we look at it in terms of an ambitious EU plan, aiming at making the EU climate neutral by 2050. It's ambitious because it wants to reach a sustainable economy by turning climate change and environmental challenges into opportunities and making the transition just and also inclusive for all. If you look at some areas like what you have mentioned about even infrastructure, is because infrastructure makes sure that some people are going to be left behind because they cannot access markets. For me, infrastructure is very, very critical because it not only allows you to access markets, because markets, that's where economic rent is shared and distributed. If you don't participate in the markets, it's going to be detrimental. But beyond that, then you can talk about other things. The European Green Deal is, the action plan is very, very important because it is going to boost efficient use of resources by moving to a clean circular economy and restore biodiversity and cut pollution. I will argue later that actually, if African economies or even societies in Africa are so overridden by poverty, it means that even climate change or even the climate, the environmental variables are also very important in inhibiting the sustainability or even their movement out of poverty. I like the subject of digital transformation and evolution. That is a topic I can talk until cows come home, and you've seen my paper in CGD on digital. Because when I was the governor of the central bank, I thought that retail electronic platform using the digital evolution would be very, very important, but we'll come to that. And the plan considers a wide array of policy measures and subsidies aimed at cutting pollution and increasing research and investment in green technologies. For me, this is where I would like to come in very strongly, especially from the AERC point of view. What are the actions to reach the EGD's goal? First, it is investing in environmental friendly technologies. And we're going to have a list of them. And I think so much has been, it was indicated in the first speaker. There was so much, the list is so long and very, very, should I say, for me, very satisfying. But also supporting innovation, rolling out cleaner and cheaper, healthier forms of private and public transport, decarbonizing the energy sector, ensuring buildings are more energy efficient. And when I look around, even in my city, there are very few buildings that are energy efficient. But essentially, that technology is there. It's the whole issue of, are we putting it in terms of our laws and even a sustainable policy, and even providing that policy clarity for long periods of time, providing financial support and technical assistance to those most affected by the plan. And this is what is called just transition mechanism, and working with international partners. And Africa is going to be part of that to improve global environment. And the actions to reach the goal, of course, is still continued, but we have some of the areas that were covered earlier. The first thing is that EU accounts only about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And the whole issue is that even if Europe reduce these to zero, obviously they are not the global players. So it means that we have to come to other countries in terms of policies that are going to help us in terms of decarbonizing the economies. Europe accounts for about 20% of global crude oil imports. And some of these crude oil exporters are from Africa. And so it means that the economic activity and even the pattern of economic activity, even in the demand and supply conditions, will change. And obviously, then it means that we have to come up with policies that are going to replace this in terms of clean energy that affect the management and governance of these resources, because they are livelihoods. And we started this many years back. We started talking about Dutch disease, but right now we are calling it a resource curse. It means that it is even a very difficult component of transformation, but I know it can be done. Cooperation is imperative, and I do believe that is going to be very, very important. But the most important thing is that we need to go back and to the drawing board and ask ourselves, what is the best new model for international cooperation? And that is going to be very, very important. Now, let me come to EU Development Cooperation Initiative that are going to support this European Green Energy, EGD. First, the Africa EU Green Energy Initiative. For us, this is very, very important. I just want to list them because we are familiar with them. The EU support for a project that will facilitate transition from fossil fuels to sustainable energy. The EU support for international development of qualitative infrastructure, and the Global Climate Change Alliance Plus. These are areas that are quite commendable, and I do believe that if they are going to work and create quite a very positive climate resilience, and especially for countries that are really suffering along this. But the development cooperation initiatives to support this plan are also very important. Continuing with the list, the EU Forest Law Enforcement Governance and Trade Action Plan, the EU Green Alliances, that is important for pursuing sustainable food system with partners, including cooperation with Africa. So, but there are diverging priorities between developed and developing countries that are going to remain a challenge in this area. And EGD will disproportionately affect countries. The EU needs to engage countries to manage the repercussions of EGD. And that's why I gave the extreme cases of, like, for example, those countries in Africa are dependent on oil export. What about those countries that are dependent on mineral exports? What really happens? Let me come to the African scene. The first question that was asked is, do African countries prioritize climate mitigation and socioeconomic issues? The bottom line is that, let's start from the very beginning. Africa contributes 2 to 3% of world's carbon gas emissions, compared to developed countries, 20% global emissions. And climate change mitigation policies are not a priority for Africa. And that is, for me, an inefficient external, it is an implication that is coming out, but it is, the bottom line is because what do African economies rely on in terms of their survival? And for example, the current endemic poverty that has a multitude of pressing issues and living conditions. COVID is just a shock, a persistent shock that has been with us for over 1 year now. But even if you look at the years before COVID, there are countries, I was a policymaker and I kept on complaining about, we are not sustaining ourselves in terms of the policy directions that we take. Some bit of it because of political cycles, and others because once we are hit by a shock, even a short-term shock, everything goes, we throw away everything away. And that's why in Africa, climate mitigating policies can be labeled as just kicking away the random. Pollution, for example, is perceived as as one way of reaching certain standards. Everybody looks at China and where they are. But let me say that the failure of economic diversification in African economies is related to so many other factors. And I do believe one of them is the global trade. And you can look at it and you can see what is really happening for economies that just produce primary products and export them. They do not participate in the structure of global value chain. We have talked about economic transformation in Africa and what is the failure of economic transformation. Right now, we have studies on industries without smokestacks, just because they're showing that Africa's development path may not even follow the developed countries, may not even follow the East Asian miracle. Maybe Africa has to chart its own path. But the bottom line is, what is that path? Perhaps it is the fourth industrial revolution that may become very, very important. But that will not succeed if we don't restructure the global value chain. So the European Union should work with its development partners to ensure all initiatives are locally accepted and coherent within partner countries' priority by applying bottom-up, inclusive and equitable development. These are very important issues, but we can talk about them for a long time. But before I end, I have a feel about, especially what I was asked about, even the digital evolution. Perhaps the digital evolution is the one that is going to give us space. As soon as we manage the digital financial services, other fintechs came up and produced solar energy products that you can actually use the mobile phone to actually pay as a payment platform, and it was based on the households. That particular time, I argued with governments why they were not supporting households to actually use solar energy, because essentially these were technologies that were compartmentalized to a household. And everybody was quite supportive. But come a particular shock and the government doesn't have resources, and then all of a sudden that is forgotten. But I do believe the question that was asked about the digital space, for me, this is going to be the solution for us to actually move away from the dependence of physical, let's say, whether it is energy, dependence on energy, and that will allow us actually to move away from some of these areas of dependence that prevents us from actually dealing with climate change and even the vagaries of climate change. We have projects that are already ongoing in ARC on climate change in Africa, and one of them is showing that actually, where we have extreme poverty or abject poverty, it's going to be very, very difficult to create a different mechanism or a different economic environment until major investments are made. The first one is actually infrastructure to access the market and change the production structure of those economies. And the second one, thank you. And the second one is actually to make sure that whatever policies we believe in, we have to make sure that they are sustainable. Some 10 years ago, when I realized African countries were coming up with Vision 2030 in Kenya, Vision 2025 in Rwanda, I argued very strongly, because I was one of the makers of Vision 2030 in Kenya. I argued strongly that those long periods of policy clarity will also ignite investment, especially coming from the private sector, and they will change the pattern of economic dependence. And that, for me, solving the poverty issues is going to be the key issues. So thank you very much for that. And I'm sorry if I was overshooting with the time, but it's exciting to talk about digitization, but it's also exciting to talk about how do we reverse the current economic model for us to start bringing in climate change or even climate mitigation as part of that, because it will affect our own dependency. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and don't be sorry, because you really share with us an insightful information and vision. So thank you so much for that, really. And I think that really represented the perfect complement to what we heard at the beginning from Carla Montesi as well. So now we got the view from Brussels. We got also an African perspective on this issue. And I think it's now the time to turn to the private sector. So Roberta, let me turn to you, because I think that what we heard at the beginning from Carla, there was a key word there, which was leverage. The EU is very well aware of the fact that public funds alone cannot do the job. Only the private sector can mobilize the order of magnitude of investments that are required to foster sustainability in a way to be compatible with the Paris Agreement globally and also in developing countries. So given this very important role, primary role of the private sector, and given the fact that you work for a company, Enel, that is a leader globally on renewable energy, let me ask you, how do you see the role of the private sector, of a company like yours, in fostering sustainability in developing countries in general, and since we have discussed that, in Africa in particular? Roberta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simone, and thank you for having me, and Bruegel, of course, and the Center for Global Development for putting together such a panel and debate. I will pick up, to answer your question, I will pick up also some of the points that were raised from Professor Ngungu and also from Carla Montesi from the Commission. Well, when you look at Africa, it's quite puzzling because you see that there are some factors that are very positive and they are all there, but nevertheless, as you were saying, 600 million people are still lacking access to electricity. The amount of investments that are going to be required is huge. The IEA has estimated that it's about 65 billion euro per year that are going to be needed in order to reach full electricity access by 2040. So it's a huge amount of money that is going to be needed. The private sector has a huge appetite to invest there. Africa has a huge resource potential. It has solar resources, the vastest on the planet, wind, hydro, geothermal. The technology is also there. And speaking of renewable energy, which today, I mean, we have seen the dramatic cost decrease that renewable energy technologies have experienced in the past decade. Renewable energy currently represents the cheapest way to bring electricity access. They are the fastest also because they are modular. So it's something that you can do very quickly. And I mean, being decentralized by their nature is exactly what Professor Ngungu was saying before. So it allows also the involvement of the community, and it's something that can serve very much the needs of the population that might be even scattered along the ground. So renewable energy is also, except for the need, of course, for having these massive investments, is also the fastest and cheapest way to solve the issue of electricity access. And this is a very important element that I really would like to stress. So, I mean, exactly what we were saying, and I mean, the EU now has this role of being a global champion in terms of exporting the Green Deal, of fostering sustainable policies. But really in Africa, it's about electricity access. So it's really a major enabler to other services. We can talk about gender parity, we can talk about education, but if you don't have access to electricity, actually your economic opportunity is completely blocked. And this is costly, it's costing 2% of Africa GDP each year, the fact that there's not a reliable access to electricity. So, I mean, as you were saying, Simone, the public funding, it's not enough. The private sector has access to deeper pockets of money. And it's really about finding the market conditions that are going to allow the unblock of these resources. As of now, most of the projects are financed by the public sector with concessional funding, and the private sector has still a less relevant role. And this happens, and it's also, this is another point that I would like to stress, it's not because the funding, the financing is not there. Once you have good projects, banks are coming, investors are coming. What we are seeing in Africa now is really that there's a lack of a pipeline of sustainable bankable projects that can guarantee viable returns to the investors. And this is asking for the reasons that also Professor Ngungu was mentioning before, which is like the lack of a clear policy framework that is able to reassure private investors. Market conditions are, I mean, very unpredictable in some African countries, sub-Saharan African countries. So you are experiencing financial risk, but also all those risks that are related to the business environment, to the climate environment, to the policy climate. So there's a set of risks that a private investor needs to see mitigated in order to really tap into this potential of resources that are there. So, I mean, then what to do? What to do in order to basically make sure that we have this viable pipeline of projects, and that really the private sector can step in and really make the difference. I mean, what we need, and I'm speaking of sustainable energy investments, is a comprehensive support mechanism for renewable energy investments. What is happening today is that what Carla was also presenting is that there has been an effort towards simplification of all the instruments that the European Union can pull out, and there has been a new instrument, which is this EFSD plus. But I mean, a further step ahead is needed, and a further simplification and a comprehensive program that is able to cover all the project phases. So from the very beginning until the end, and put together a component that mixes together the policy dialogue, the technical assistance, which is, this won't be stressed enough. It's very important to have technical assistance to be provided to African countries, which is going to be instrumental when it comes to preparing the project documents, all the tender rules. This is something that, as of now, it's lacking and is scaring investors a lot. And also, like a financial components, as I was saying, this policy dialogue, technical assistance, and capacity building. So an instrument that could put everything together would be ideal. And this is what the Renew Africa initiative, which was created in 2019 by 27 renewable energy leaders, has among its main goal. The idea is exactly to create this instrument, not to create, to basically advocate to the European Union in order to put under the same legal umbrella. It's not about reinventing the wheel. What is needed, it's there most of the times, but it's very relevant to have all these instruments put together under one legal roof in a way that investors have clarity of the support mechanisms that can be put in place, and also can exploit the synergies with the financing instruments that are coming from the member states and from other DFIs. In this sense, what Carla was mentioning about the Team Europe approach is music to the ears of private investors. Is certainly a very relevant step in this direction, because there are a plethora of actors that are willing to do and to contribute and to finance projects. But what is happening is, because of the complexity of the fragmentation, it's very difficult to find a compass and to see what is needed and really like pull it quickly to invest in Africa. I mean, what we are seeing as private sector is that the political momentum is there. We have seen also last week the high-level EU Green Investment Forum that was organized under the Portuguese presidency. The technologies there, resources are there. We are in a post-COVID-19 scenario where also we have the opportunity to design the recovery plans that take into account a green trajectory, economic recovery, coupled also with the need to increase electricity access in Africa. So our wish is really like to make sure that the European Union can really create under one umbrella, put together all these instruments and make sure that they are available and very visible to investors. As I was saying, I mean, the time is now, and we really perceive that the political momentum is there.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Roberta. If I may ask you one follow-up question, does NL access EU finance, either in the form of guarantees or blended finance for sustainable energy projects. And one other question, if I may, is Enel actually investing in any new carbon-based energy projects in Africa? And if not, why not?
Yes, I mean, being an international, utility, as Simone was saying, we are very much investing in Africa. Actually, we are the largest independent power producer in the continent. And I mean, of course, we make use of all the instruments that are available on the market. And I mean, to answer your second question, it's really about thinking what makes the economic sense. And for us, it's renewable energy, because for the reasons that I mentioned before, they are the cheapest way to generate power as of today. They are fast, you can easily deploy it. As I was saying, they are modular, so you can really increase the size of the power plant when you can. So we see the economic sense going in this direction, and coupled with what we were saying before concerning the Green Deal, we really see that we should foster sustainable investments and really contribute in helping Africa in setting on a green growth trajectory.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So thank you to all the speakers for those very insightful contributions. We are now going to open the floor and take questions from the audience. A few have come in already. If I could put the first one to all three of you. So the question is, given limited financial resources, shouldn't future finance from the EU concentrate on a few selected partners in terms of geography, so certain key countries, and also in terms of sectors? So for example, should it focus on hydrogen? So if we could start with Carla. Oops, you're muted, Carla, sorry.
Yes, sorry, I was muted and I muted myself. Many thanks for the question. It's really difficult to say that we focus just on some countries. You know, we are at the beginning of the programming exercise. When doing this work, of course, we have the distribution of the funds to take into account some criteria. So we cannot say we focus just on some countries, but clearly we will focus on countries in different way, depending of the state of the development of the different countries. This is about the funds, the use of money, I will say. But of course, take into account our climate diplomacy. We will work with all the countries around the world, even more on climate diplomacy with the countries that are very high in the emission of gas. So this is about the amount. About the sector, allow me to say that of course will be a focus. We have clearly established criteria, priorities. The priorities are the priorities that we are clear, the priorities of the TIS Commission, the priorities of Europe. But looking to the priorities with Europe, there is of course all the development of sustainable growth also about with our partner countries. There is the support of all the SDGs, and there is the clear support for this transition on all the key elements and the sector of the Green Deal. And but clearly we don't see this Green Deal story as a different story. Of course, it's clear with us that today working for the planet are a clear benefit for people, for the sustainable development for nature. So we have always, and it is also, I take the opportunity to answer to the Professor Nongo that mentioned different key initiative, but clearly the work on greening investment will have also the focus on promoting the just, inclusive transition, also looking to reducing poverty, reducing inequalities. So the focus on sustainable growth, on job creation is there, but it's also with the link, trying to give it its support without damaging the planet. And I think that both our African partners and the European Union, we can succeed on this. Over to you.
Thank you, Carla. Professor?
Thank you very much. That's a good question. And my point, I wanted to start and ask myself, what was the main goal that we wanted to achieve? If it was a whole issue of decarbonization, that is supporting this climate change, which is going to be sustainable, then it is a public good. And if it's a public good, then choosing selecting partners in terms of geography and sectors, it may not work very well. It's just like where we are now in the COVID. You want to make sure that even your neighbor is vaccinated, or even they have the same measures of containing the COVID, because it's becoming a public good and it's going to spread to us. But that is on one hand, what was the goal. But on the other hand, perhaps you can actually look at amenable sectors that create, should I say, a very good example. For example, if it is some sectors where actually the private returns are higher, then it's going to encourage duplication. That for me, I would support, just in case those investments that move us away from, and put us away into renewable energy, for example, and they have returns, adequate returns, they are going to offer some good example in terms of what we should do. But from a selected geography, it's going to be problematic, because what happens when the others are still destroying the environment? So it is a case by case. I would consider that as a case by case, because I do believe that if renewable energy, for example, was profitable, then everybody would join up, because the herding behavior would really work very well. But if it is a public good that we want to support, that is climate change and supporting the environment is going to be important, is a public good, then we have to make sure that we don't select regions, but we deal with the whole regions. But it's a case by case. I think we can move even sector by sector, and then and give ourselves some timeline, which is going to be very, very important. And I believe that is a whole area of what to do. But at the end of the day, the first thing is to encourage the particular policy, adoption of those policies. And then from then on, we can slice out what kind of investment can we manage. I do believe some of them are very, very important, because they're going to actually provide, should I say, the replication that's going to be very, very important in terms of policy paradigm as well as sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. Roberta, I have a slightly different question for you. And this is about risk. So is political risk the main hurdle in attracting private green investment?
No, unfortunately not. There are a series of other risks that private investors are facing, and actually we were seeing that. I mean, I can speak of the example of renewable energy projects, for example. There are various phases of a project, and what we have experienced for us is that the phase that is encountering the highest chance of risk is the part where you have the contract negotiation, the central part of the development of a project. So as I was saying, the contract negotiation, the preparation of the project documents, it goes back to what I was saying before. So sometimes people that are working on the preparation of the documents, they don't have the right skills in order to prepare a set of documents that might reassure the investor. So this is like the central critical part of the project when it comes to the making of the contract, the tendering documents that are going to be launched, where private investors are going to participate. This is a part that it's risky also for us, but also, I mean, there are other sets of risks except for the political one, which are, for example, the breach of the contract, the expropriation, convertibility risks. I mean, there are, as I was mentioning before, there are many areas that could look risky to an investor. That's why there's really a need to have an instrument that makes sure that when a private sector wants to approach Africa, all of them are covered or mitigated.
Thank you, Roberta. Carla, I mean, you've heard what Roberta is saying. So the EU, you mentioned the various instruments, including the EFSD+, the guarantees, the blended finance. Not much around technical assistance, though.
I can be very straightforward saying that clearly, as you know, when we launched the European investment plan, we had clearly three parts. One was really all the work that we have to do in improving the governance, in supporting our partners in reform. The second was clearly the package of technical assistance to do this. Technical assistance to support, in one side, our partner countries in the reform. The second in preparing investment project and supporting this with the financial institution. Now, I think Roberta rightly said that the key point that we have today is that we are missing good financial investment projects, program that could be supported by the financial institution. So clearly, technical assistance was there now in the European investment plan, will be there even more in the new financial instrument, where clearly talking about our external guarantees, so the new EFSD+, we have clearly foreseen funds for the technical assistance to support financial institutions, to support the private sector in preparing good and sustainable projects that could be supported by the financial institution. Over to you. So we know that this is a key problem. Funds will be there, will be available also to support private sector and the financial institutions. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Just going a little bit back to sort of regions of focus, there was a question that came in earlier about the role for EU development cooperation in the Green Deal in Turkey and Latin America this time. So moving away a little bit from Africa. Roberta, do you want to have a go?
Yes, what was the question? Again,
so
sorry.
The role for EU development cooperation and the Green Deal in Turkey and Latin America.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say that if really we want to be, the EU wants to be serious. I mean, the way it has shown that it can be, and Carla was mentioning the fact that we put into a law our climate targets. I mean, of course, we cannot just focus on one region of the globe. Africa, of course, is the natural partner of the EU because of, I mean, the geographical proximity being the first reason. But I mean, if we want to tackle the global climate crisis, we can't just do Europe and Africa. We need to involve also the other areas of the globe. It's about having a climate diplomacy that can really make sure that, I mean, that the policies around the globe somehow are speaking to each other, and really like making sure that the Green Deal becomes really the virtuous example that can even inspire other continents. So I would really see this way, like with a more global perspective.
Super, thank you. Simone.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, all the three of you, the following question. Last week, President von der Leyen called for an African Green Deal. Now, my question is, how would, in your view, an African Green Deal look like? I mean, based on the basis of which principles and which key action, and what should, in your view, be the most sensible contribution of the EU in the development of such an African Green Deal? So maybe, Professor, if you want to go first, and then Carla Montesi, Roberto Usar.
You're muted.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. And then that is a very interesting question, because the whole issue is to ask exactly what does an African Green Deal work like, and what kind of preconditions do we anticipate that we're going to get from Africa? And the first thing, and it's something that we have been with for a long time, but I think we actually allowed that the leadership in the world in terms of solving poverty in Africa would come from the World Bank, and the policy on resources and policy side, the World Bank and the IMF. But I think we need to look at what are the pressing needs, because poverty itself is one of the most pervasive condition that actually may even put the Green Deal into a very second or third place. So it is something that we really need to deal with, because you have to provide some livelihood and improve on the living conditions before you even start talking about climate change. And that's for me is a very, very important aspect. The second thing is that climate mitigating policies and how they can be sustained is a very important point that we are really trying to make. And that's why I said the question that was raised about selected partners in terms of geography and sectors would be a very good showcasing that you can actually have, should I say, investments in climate mitigation that have returns. That then becomes like a private good and everybody can invest in it. And what we are really doing is to make sure that it is going to work for everyone else. I gave an example about the solar energy, household solar energy provided by Copper, a friend of mine in London Business School, and he was part of the digital financial services. The bottom line is that they could not even cope with the demand. But again, they could also not deal with the price. The costs are very high. And so you can see that it's a profitable venture. It is very good for climate change. It's a renewable energy. But at the same time, we need to see how do we match the cost, because at the end of the day, the households are talking about cost in terms of the initial cost. And then, of course, the whole idea, and this is where Europe comes in, the whole idea of global trade. And I've been looking at, for example, the WTO, remember the Uruguay round, and then we came to Doha development round. And the whole issue is that, why was it not being supported by Europe? And it is part of changing the economic structure, the production structure. They are not different demands. They are actually saying we want to focus on poverty reduction, which is going to be sustainable. But then how do we do it? One of them, and I think Mikhail has talked about food production by African Development Bank. It is because that is one of the pervasive living conditions that is quite problematic. But then infrastructure improves the production structures and accessibility to markets. It means that when we do that, we can actually now cope with try to even push the climate, the Green Deal kind of policies that are going to be pervasive and sustainable. So I see it myself from the livelihood point of view, and investments that are actually going to be geared towards that livelihood. And once we solve that as the first stage, the second stage of bringing in the Green Deal kind of sustainable environmental policies will work. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Can I ask you, there's a question that's come in for you, Professor, again. This one is on the role of domestic markets. So the question is, why not instead focus on providing funding to domestic entrepreneurs rather than attracting foreign investors?
I personally believe that would be a very important kind of direction in terms of going to the private sector, because one of the biggest problems in Africa is mistrust of government, and mistrust of government on one side, and then the mistrust of government in terms of providing a sustainable policy environment. And so for me, it is actually private sector is very, very important. But let me say this, as long as institutions are weak, we always get into we are not so sure about the future. Institutions must be strong so that they define the legal framework, or perhaps what you might call the rules of the game. But they also should be strong so that they define the appropriate incentives. And then a combination of the legal framework and the appropriate incentives is going to encourage prudent behavior in the marketplace. And that's what we are lacking. I would have gone flat out and say private sector, but we have to go back and say, who is supposed to create that environment for strong institution? That's why I started by talking about leadership in a strong institution, policy leaders and all that. That's what AERC does. If I am assured that the market policies and even taxation policies are not going to change, I'm going to invest. Why most of the private sector pulls back from investing is because of lack of clarity in the policy space and lack of strong institutions that are going to safeguard the legal framework or the rules of the game and the appropriate incentives. And that is where the crux of the problem lies there.
Great, thank you, Professor. Carla Montesi, I would have a question for you now. The question is, how would you see the role of the European financing institutions such as KfW, Cassa di Deposito e Consignazione, or Cassa Depositi e Prestiti in the implementation of the EFD Plus, specifically on the initiatives related to the European Green Deal? I think you're muted. Yeah.
Sorry.
I think, yeah.
Because automatically you muted myself and I forgot. The question is very simple. Because the answer is very simple, because when we act and when we use our EFCD, the current one and the future one, we act through our financial institutions. So we are not giving the guarantees ourselves. We are not working directly with the private sector, but we are working through the financial institutions. So all these financial institutions are our key instrument to foster the private investment, and we are working with them. And now coming back to the question, the previous question on technical assistance, as was mentioned also by Roberta, this technical assistance is given at three levels, I would say. It's a technical assistance for partner countries for reform, it's a technical assistance to the financial institution to work and to facilitate the preparation of the work, and also is the technical assistance to local African financial institutions, because we really believe that also our partner financial institutions have a key role to play in facilitating investment and also in facilitating the African investors. Over to you.
Thank you. Very clear indeed. Thank you so much. As we are about to the end of our time, I think we would like to go back to the three of you, probably in a reverse order of speaking, in order to give you the chance to have a 5 minutes final remark each. So, Roberta, would you like to give a final message after our conversation first?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I believe that we touched the most important points when it comes to sustainable energy investments in Africa. I would say that the most important message would be really to tackle the issue with the perspective of electricity access, to increase the economic opportunities that really the continent might tap into, and that now, because of a lack of the most basic electricity services, it's something that it's impossible to do. And also the European Green Deal, as among its cornerstone, there is the idea of this inclusive, sustainable growth. And electricity access means also to include the various spheres of the population in the economic development of a country. It means giving opportunities, and it really means to have that enabler that can really promote the launch of the continental economy. Renewables are, as I was saying before, the highway to solve this issue, because it makes economic sense for investors. So it's really like, I can see this as the major component of the economic growth of the continent. And also something that we as Europeans also we might need to consider is that we have the leadership in renewable energy technologies, because decades of stringent targets have fostered R&Ds and the capabilities of our companies. We have some super majors really from Europe that are investing in renewable energies all across the globe. So it's an opportunity for our African partners, but it's also an industrial opportunities to have the best of our technologies at play for the service of a very good cause.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And by the way, this idea of the triple dividend, I think it's very powerful in this field. No, doing something that is good for the climate, is good for the development of Africa, and is good also for our industries, since it creates also opportunity of industrial development and cooperation. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you very much. And Professor Ndungu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I start from where you stopped, because essentially, why you don't even have investments in Africa for these big industries is because they are never sure about the energy prices or even energy supply. And this is one of the major problems you can actually think of. I spent quite some bit of time in around 8 years in the Central Bank of Kenya. And one of the biggest problems was how to deal with monetary policy with the supply shocks, and especially in the Horn of Africa, where rain patterns are very, very difficult to predict. When there's a drought, essentially, then you have two problems. One of them is food supply, and the other one is energy supply because of dependence on hydroelectricity. The biggest problem, and that's why we have serious cycles, economic cycles, is that the monetary policy itself, you have to contain prices of the inflation that is put by energy and food prices. So you actually push the economy into a temporary recession, so that you don't want the prices, you have to destroy prices from forming a plateau of high prices. You can imagine that alone itself actually drives the economic performance. And you can imagine nobody wants to relate it directly to environment. It is actually an environmental problem that is coming up. So you can see that it is actually important and critical actually to resolve the energy, sustainable energy. And we are blessed, we have massive sources of that renewable energy. The second point is about the digital space. And for me, it's also when I was in the central bank, I introduced the retail electronic payments platform that ended up becoming now the digital financial services, and everybody is talking about. And what I've realized in the last 10 years is that the fintechs have come in to resolve and to come up with products. I call them sustainable business models, and they are affecting all sectors of the economy. Sustainable business models, whether it is in agriculture, whether it's solar energy, whether it's water supply, and all that. So in a sense, this is where we are. It's a question of now pinpointing those areas that we can invest. Why are we investing on sustainable energy? Is because it is going to give us some long-term planning measures. Why do we want fintechs to get in? How you regulate fintechs is a totally different matter. It's a capability problem. But we need to allow the fintechs to come in and develop products. That is, they are going to be friendly to, they are going to affect all sectors of the economy, and they are also going to be to support the Green Deal from the African side. And that is the way I look at it. I strongly believe in those areas because I have really served and participated in them. I practice that even in my own household. I'm a rural farmer. I grow tea, by the way, and I use solar energy. And even in my home here in Nairobi, I use solar energy. But how do we replicate that? The initial cost is very high, but in the long run, we have to showcase that it's actually, if you were to look at the unit cost, it actually solves the problem. But it is the initial cost, or the, should I say, the policy drive that we require. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then from Nairobi to Brussels, Director Montesi, the floor is yours. Yeah, I think we have an issue with the mic.
Once again, sorry. Okay. So many thanks, and many thanks for this interesting dialogue. I don't know, as the conclusion, what maybe I would like to say that clearly we are convinced that Africa and Europe in the common interest can work together, can lead a smart green transformation. The key elements that we have in front of us is how we succeed to turn some challenges that we have into solution for a better future, solution that clearly benefit nature, people, and the sustainable development. So we are clearly wishing to work with our partner countries, preparing a comprehensive multi-sector, multi-stakeholder investment package for Africa that will focus all the key elements that Professor just mentioned, that will be the digital, it will be renewable energy, increasing access. Once again, the access to energy will be one of our key priorities, but also looking to transport, looking also to the agri-food system that will be clearly key sector to improve, to fight also against the poverty. And just to mention one element that the professor also clearly mentioned is the support also to the mitigation target. So we'll just to ensure that will be a significant share of our cooperation budget that also will be allocated to adaptation action, to the disaster risk reduction action. Now, maybe as the last word, I would like to say that this year, we were talking about the future, but this year we will have a big opportunity to strengthen our role, our engagement, our commitment from all around the world at the upcoming summit. Will be the Summit on Biodiversity, the Summit on Climate in Glasgow, but also the Food System Summit. I think that if we all are engaged, when we said all, it's about the countries, it's about international organizations, it's about international financial institutions, private sector, civil society, academia. I think if we all join force, we can clearly increase our commitment to a better world for all of us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and I really share this final message you gave, and I really think that what we learned today is that we have all the ingredients of the recipe. We have competitive renewable technology available in the world. We have the financing capacity. We have a private sector that is eager to make investments in Africa and in other developing countries, strongly emerging markets. We have the political institutions that are willing to support, and therefore it seems that we really have all what we need to make sustainable development in developing countries, and notably the green transition in developing countries and Africa, a reality. And I really like this idea that 2021 is a year of action. We have an unprecedented green international agenda in front of us. And also thanks, I would say, to the new US president and the new impetus that has been given to the issue of climate change, we can really this time make the difference altogether. Thank you all, and I would give the word back to Michaela for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simone, and thank you all for your excellent contributions to the discussion. You're both clear, concise, and very insightful. Thanks also to the audience for your questions and comments, which we have done our best to put to our guests. And thank you to my co-host, Simone, as well, and finally to the teams at both CGD and Bruegel for all their work behind the scenes to organize this event. The conversation continues, it's very much alive, and we hope to convene you all again to take forward the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.